Let's talk a little baseball. Tim Kirkshin, ESPN. Don't forget ESPN's baseball coverage this Tuesday night. Phillies-Cubs in Chicago. The coverage begins at 7 o'clock. We got first-place Phillies, and Tim Kirkshin got a chance to see them up close and personal the other night. It was a late night for everybody out there. But first-place Phillies, but you know, Tim, in Philly, there's always something wrong with this team, right? They can't just be the first-place Phillies that everybody loves right now, could they?
Well, that's impossible in Philly. That's impossible in most places, I must say, at least the ones that I go to. Yeah, there are things to worry about. Bryce Harper's slump. Do they have enough starting pitching? David Robertson's injury. Is their defense really good enough? All of those are legitimate questions. However, they are in first place. I don't see a great team in that division running away with it. So as long as the Phillies keep banging away like this, I think they're going to be in this thing for the entire season. There may be 3 others in it with them, 2 others, who knows. But I like the Phillies' chances in this division. I just like a few other teams' chances also.
Well, let's look at their pitching, because in baseball, pitching almost means everything if you look at the playoffs and stuff. And they got Arrieta, who's really struggling along, and they've got Nola, who you saw the other night, and no one knows what's going on with him. 4.86, Arrieta 4.02. Eflin's been pretty good. He's pitching today, although he got hit around. Eichhoff stepped in, but do they have starting pitching that you like, or are they going to have to address that later on in the next month or two?
I don't think they have enough starting pitching to win the World Series with the team they have now. And if that's the goal, as it should be, I think they're a little short, and I think they will look around. And given how much money they've spent to this point, given how excited people are, as they should be in Philadelphia, I think they'll go the extra mile to find another starting pitcher. I don't know who that might be. Dallas Keuchel's a free agent. Madison Bumgarner's become available. Who knows if any of that stuff will work out. But I think they have to look around for a starting pitcher, and they might have to look around for a bullpen guy. But this is what teams do that are in contention. It's great to be in contention. You just got to be ready to go out and make another move if you have to.
It would seem to me, Tim, that Mad Bum would be the guy I would love to see the Phillies make a run for. Obviously, with Keuchel, you get him, and you don't know how long it's going to take for him to get into pitching shape. And Madison's already, Madison's Madison. He's had an unbelievable postseason track record. How realistic do you think it'll be, or is this going to be one of those things where 5, 6, 7 teams are all bidding for the services, and it's going to get a little crazy there?
Well, it's going to get crazy for Bumgarner, and I certainly don't know for sure, but my guess is he's going to get traded before July 31st, because he's either going to re-sign long-term with the Giants, which at this point doesn't seem particularly likely to me, and I think he's going to free agency after this season one way or another, which makes the pursuit of Bumgarner very interesting and very dangerous in a way. Even though he is a complete difference maker, he could turn teams, from contenders into champions. That's how good he is, especially in October, but it's going to take a ton to get him still. And are you going to be willing to give up 2 really good young players for a guy that you might only be renting for a couple of months? Those are the difficult decisions that teams are going to have to make.
What do you think the Phillies, and it's hard to predict how they'll look in a month or so from now, but what do you think they might need more when all is said and done? Is a starting pitcher or a bullpen arm?
I think it's going to be a starting pitcher, and there are bullpen guys available all the time, especially at the trade deadline. So I don't think that's going to be a problem, finding someone that can help them early and late out of that bullpen. I think they need another starting pitcher, and we'll see. But none of this matters if Aaron Nola doesn't become the pitcher that he needs to be. And again, we did his game the other night, as you said. He pitched poorly. He did not look like himself, and it was a really painful outing for him. That's going to have to turn, and it's going to have to turn quickly if they're going to be the team they need to be.
Tim Kirkshin, ESPN's coverage of the Phillies and Cubs Tuesday night. He joins us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Harper hitting second today. He's, you mentioned it, underwhelming, 220. They flipped him in Segura. That's something that the Nationals tried last year. They moved him around from time to time, but ultimately he hit in the number 3 spot. Is this a good move? Do you like Kapler trying to do something, or should he just kind of let Harper kind of work his way out of that? Or when you saw him Monday, do you see like, maybe he's pressing or this guy, like what is your view of them trying to do something to move him and get him going?
Well, I think it's great that they're moving him around. I certainly understand why he hits third every day, and I understand why you keep him there. But sometimes when a guy is struggling, put him in another spot. I really don't think it helps if you drop him from third to seventh. I think it's a whole lot better when you move him to a spot like second where he's hit before, done very well before, he's used to that or he's done that before. So, yeah, I'm all for when a guy is struggling like this, just give him a new look, give him something, and tell him, look, man, we love you. You're going to play every day. We're just going to try you somewhere else and see if we can get this started.
Tim, there's a long list of big free agent signings throughout the history of baseball who have signed with these, passionate northeastern cities, whether it's New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and had difficult first seasons, those adjustment seasons. Now, I know Bryce was down in – it's not like Bryce was far away in Washington, but I would say the Philly, New York, Boston fan base a little bit different, more of a microscope. Is it almost natural to expect year one was going to have these kind of growing pains and acclimation and maybe not his best year as a Philly right off the bat?
Yeah, I think that's logical. Trying to get acclimated, I think, can be really difficult. I know Giancarlo Stanton had a hard time, but he was going from Miami to the Yankees. That's a gigantic change. Mm-hmm. And he was going from, one league to another. But I think Harper is facing some of the same things. But I think he looks around and eventually he'll realize this isn't all about me, which I think it was to some degree in Washington. He knows it's Rhys Hoskins' team. He knows there's a lot of other guys that were brought in the offseason, including JT Realmuto, to make this team better. I don't think the pressure should be as enormous as others think it should be, and I think he'll come out of it because he's going to learn to relax at some point. And when he does, I think we're going to see some real damage done.
Hey, Timmy, the Phillies bullpen has been kind of a mess, and one of the guys last year that they could count on was Sir Anthony Dominguez. He has not been the same guy at all this year. When they kind of stack that bullpen up, they don't have David Robertson. Dominguez has not been the same. Tommy Hunter's been out. I mean, they've had a lot of issues there. Do they feel like, because you mentioned the starting pitching being more of a problem, and I probably would agree with you, but do they feel that's because they have guys that they think can turn it around?
Yeah, and their bullpen has to get better from here. And Robertson, I'm not sure exactly how healthy he is. We were told initially this is not a big deal, and maybe it's a slightly bigger deal than we think it is. Dominguez, again, this is a really hard game to play, and you have one successful rookie year, and suddenly it just doesn't guarantee anything the next year. He's going to have to get this straightened out. So, again, they really need to keep their eye on what they're doing here, and they are. So I think they'll get a starter and a reliever before July 31st because I think it's going to take both of those to not only win the division but do something in October. We can't lose sight of the fact of how good the Dodgers are right now.
It's funny, Tim, like the new norm is for a lot of teams that don't have an elite closer, which is pretty much most teams, to go into spring training and say they're going by committee approach and they're going to get the best guy who can get outs. But by 2 weeks into the season, all those teams wind up having a guy who's got more saves and emerges as that closer. I feel like sometimes the Phillies talk, though, as if that's what they really want, like a committee, guys to get out situationally, and they're not going to have a pure traditional closer role, and then they're really not going to change from that. Do you think that can work?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the trends we're seeing in the big league. Keep in mind, it's just a small sample, but the Mariners had like 5 different guys get a save the first 8 days of the season. That had never happened before in Major League history. And we're seeing more and more teams look at the situation and say, well, if we don't have one overwhelming Aroldis Chapman, Mariano Rivera type, why not do what we do with our rotation and mix and match and have our best guy ready for the 9th inning depending on the matchups? It's what the Cardinals have done with Jordan Hicks and Andrew Miller, even though it hasn't worked out exactly like they wanted. So I think we should get used to this, that the defined roles of the closer, I think, are going away slowly here, and more teams are saying, we're going to find the best guy for the ninth inning, and it might not be the best guy from last night.
They're playing the Brewers, and you're finding out, or we're finding out, or Philly fans are finding out, this Brewers team's got a pretty good lineup. I mean, there's a couple of teams. The Phillies are in first place, but there's a couple of teams when you match up with, like this Brewers team, you mentioned the Dodgers, that they're going to have to really try to figure out how to get out because this Brewers team has got a pretty good lineup.
Yeah, there are a lot of pretty good lineups in the National League right now. The Cubs are loaded. The Brewers are really good. The Dodgers can score runs with anybody. And, again, this is why the Phillies need to upgrade their pitching because they're going to run into some pretty good offensive teams as the season goes along. But I like that Milwaukee team a lot, and it'll be real interesting to see as pitchers become available, do they make a run at Madison Bumgarner and see if they can get him? He would be a perfect fit there, but I repeat, Bumgarner would be a perfect fit in a lot of places.
You know, other than Segura, or I should say, other than Michael Brantley going to the Astros, which was such a great marriage and for a lot of good reasons, I think Segura to the Phillies, Tim, has to stand out as one of the, the best acquisitions in baseball, given, what you had to give up to get him and the impact that the player has had on his respective team.
Yeah, he's a really good player, as you guys have seen now. He's a hit machine, which he has been for several years. He's an upgrade defensively on what they had last year. And, this is why you have to like the Phillies, because they upgraded their defense so much. It was so bad last year, and it's so much better this year. Not great, but it's so much better than it was last year. And Segura's right in the middle of that. And up the middle now, especially with the catcher and the new shortstop, they're a whole lot better than they were last year.
Yeah, I think we saw a statistic from one of the local Philly guys about how their defense, they are 20-5 this year when they don't commit an error, 4-13 when they do. That is unbelievable. I mean, it shows you how this margin of error is so small in today's games because a lot of these teams are so similar. You got to be able to field the ball and pitch, and that has been a big factor of why the Phillies have kind of turned things around. But I'll ask you this, Timmy. They were in this thing last year, but do you feel being around them that they feel different with this team?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I think if they were truthful, they would realize that the way they played the last 2.5, 3 months of last year was not who they really were, but they knew that there were some holes last year. And I spent a lot of time in Clearwater this spring waiting for Bryce Harper to show up, and every single Philly I talked to essentially said the same thing. We're way better than we were last year, and that was before Harper showed up. And then when he did show up, I sense that, there's the last piece for this team. They think now they're good enough to go to the World Series potentially. So, yeah, I think there's a new vibe there, and I think it's palpable. I sensed it the minute I walked in their clubhouse this spring.
Okay, Tim Kirkshin, catch ESPN's baseball coverage Tuesday night. Phillies-Cubs coverage begins at 7 o'clock as the Phillies in action right now, losing to the Brewers 8-3. And we do appreciate Tim coming on, talking a little Phillies baseball. By the way, first place Phillies, everybody out there listening, Sixers are done, Eagles off season, Flyers off season, Phillies now at the top, and they welcome you in with a first place Phillies team. Tim, we appreciate the time, pal.
Okay, fellas. See you later.
Tim Kirkshin, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.